Hi, I'm Nathan Malin. I'm in your class for 41310. I'm going to be going over for session four. I'm going to be going over NVIDIA as our stock, and let me share my code and explain it to you guys. So, um, here's for session four. I I'm going to go through three different trading signals that I went over. I went over 50-day moving average, which is a medium length moving out signal. And then I also went over 200-day moving average, which is a long-term signal. And I also went over RSI, which is a signal that basically determines how much volume a stock is actually getting to determine whether it's overbought or oversold. So let's go over my code. So first I imported the data from Yahoo Finance. I downloaded NVIDIA for a 2-year period. And for prices in the last 50 days, NVIDIA here disclosed its values. And for the moving average for 50 days is sum of all these prices for the last 50 days. And I divided it all of them over 50 to get an average price that I was going to have for the last 50 days. And I did the same thing for the 200-day moving average where I'd use prices and then last 200 and then NVIDIA and then the closing price for each day. And I added all these different days up and I divided by 200 to get the average price that it would have over the last 200 days. And my current price, I had the current closing price as of Friday, which is the last trading day. And I basically wanted it to print all NVIDIA analysis, and I wanted it to have its current price, its 50-day moving average, and its 200-day moving average. And I use float, as float allows you to have multiple decimals and allows you to adjust as obviously things are moving. And um, for my trend analysis, if the current price is more than the float over the 50-day moving average and the float of the 50-day moving average is more than the 200-day moving average, it would be a bull market, which means that we recommend that you should buy NVIDIA, and it's a very good uptrend. And then if the current price is less than the float of the 50-day moving average and the float of the 50-day moving average is less than the 200-day moving average, then it'd be a bear market as it's a strong downtrend in the market. Or else I think it's uncertain as obviously there's multiple signals at play. I don't think technical analysis is perfect. Um, and for my next momentum analysis, I was going to use RSI, and I used a for loop for the ranges of 1 to 15. So it's a 14-day moving average or 14-day RSI, which is the most standard one that we use in technical analysis. And then I basically did change of the NVIDIA at each closing date for all of the 15 days. And then I had the daily changes for float of the change. And if that change is more than zero, it'd be called a gain. And if not, it's called a loss. So basically the RSI is calculated by the average gain. So it's sum of all these different gains in the last 14 days. So gains over 14, and then also the losses over 14. And then the RSI calc is if average losses is more than zero, is obviously if you have a loss of less than zero, we're just going to get a negative RSI, which obviously in our validation, it can't happen. So for RSI, this is our calculation for it. And if else, RSI is 100, which is a max RSI if there's no losses at all, if it's all gains. Um, And then step 11 is to print the RSI signal. So I printed RSI, which printed the RSI. And if it's more than 70, I'd say it's a sell. And then if RSI is less than 30, I'd call it a buy. Then if it's between those things, I'd call it a hold. And then the final summary is obviously we want to have a confidence level for them. So it's very complex because all three of these signals can tell different things about how NVIDIA is going to be moving. And if the current price is more than the 50-day and the 50-day more than the 200 and RSI is less than 30, it's a very strong confidence level for a buy. And I highly recommend that you buy NVIDIA. And then if the current price is less than the 50-day and the 50-day is less than the 200 and RSI is more than 70, then you do I'd highly confidently say to sell the stock. And then if not, I'd say to hold. There's a lot of mixed signals, so there's a very low confidence level. And then the outputs are as following. So obviously we had the current price, the 50-day, the 200-day, and then the trend. So it's set as a bull market based off of the data. Then the RSI is a 76, which is slightly higher than the 70. And obviously, I'd say this is because NVIDIA is the most popular stock in the S&P 500 at the moment. So that could be a reason why uh, the output would be to sell to that the RSI may be more than 76, as there obviously is so much volume every day going into the stock, is it just reached the highest market cap ever for a stock in the S&P. And it's also above the 50-day and the 130, so I'd recommend that it's a bull market. But it also said it's a sell signal based on the RSI, so it said as a hold. But obviously, my analysis personally is that it's slightly more than 76. It's the highest, probably one of the highest volume stocks out there in the market. So I would still like from the programming, I'd call it a hold, but more likely based off of how strong, how much higher the current price is than the 50-day and the 200-day moving average, I'd still call it a buy. And here are validation checks. So if the moving average for the 50-day or the 200-day is more than the current price times 1.2, that's kind of like an outlier. So we'd say the calculation may be wrong. And for the RSI, we want to make sure it's in the valid range. So for RSI is less than 0 or more than 100, it's obviously supposed to be between 0 and 100. So we'd probably that'd be another validation check. And then the other one is data completeness. So for total days for NVIDIA, and we want to make sure that it matches for the amount of trading days that we use for both of them. And for eyes in the range for the last five prices, this basically disclosed the last five prices. So for the last for Friday, it was 173.50. So and it all was around there. So that was my validation check to make sure that all the prices were reasonable. And I would say based off of this, um, I would say it's still a buy, and I'd say there's a lot of risk when it comes to fully focusing on technical signals. Is obviously when it comes to our programming that I just did, it'd call it a hold. But when you're really looking at it, it depends on the stock, is obviously not all stocks will have less than a 30 or more than a 70, and it'd be a strong signal for a buy or a sell. Is obviously there's so many other factors at play, such as market cap, volume, and general sentiment or pessimism or optimistic sentiment towards that stock, is obviously there's so much institutional value coming from these institutions into these stocks every day that it can really just sway how a stock could be moving. And especially if it's closer to earnings, it'd probably have a higher trading volume. And I would say that you'd probably put a decent position into Nvidia, especially because of every time it's been closing for earnings, it's been really, really good. And I'd say lately it's been super optimistic among investors, and obviously there's other stocks that are also performing well. So based off of my personal analysis, I'd say it's a buy, but based off of the actual programming, it's not. And I think there's some things that I could have probably changed in terms of how I would have approached this assignment with this stack. As maybe I probably could have done like an MCAD or something like that. And I also probably maybe if I was really thinking about a short term versus medium, and I probably would want to do it closer to earnings season, as I'm very curious to see how a stock would trade when it's closer to earnings season relative to being very far out from it. And I think a 20-day moving average may have been the perfect signal to see whether Nvidia should have been bought or not. And also, I think I'm just curious to see what, like, if there's any like gray areas that can be covered with programming. Is obviously there's like a very clear line between whether a stock should be bought or sold based off the RSI or the moving averages. And I think they just don't tell the full story. And I think there should be other indicators that probably should have added, as well as um, just general curiosity about different signals when it comes to stocks. I think I also probably could have done multiple stocks, as I obviously wanted to see what Nvidia would be like compared to other ones in the industry to do a comparative analysis. And yeah, I think that's most of my time. I really enjoyed doing this assignment, and I think that's very interesting to see a new face of technical analysis. As obviously I'm a fundamental investor, so this is a lot different than what I've been doing in the past. So hopefully I interpreted the code well. So